rather than fake it until you make it, I kind of flip the meaning of it, and I tell people practice it until you become it, right? And it means, okay, you go there and you have certain areas that you need to develop. Let's say Vitel's conversation or public speaking, right? Okay, you're not a great public speaker, but you know what some of the let's say the body language should be like, what how you should speak, how you should make eye contact with the audience. Don't fake it, practice it. Be yourself, be someone who is practicing these new skills. And if you, going back to the point that I made just a moment ago, if you do it and practice it enough, you will normalize it, you will become it. It will become unconscious competence.
Welcome to the Ideas on Stage podcast, your regular insight into leadership communication.
Hey, Tomas, great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Andrea, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
I'm also looking forward to it. I told you before we got started, Tomas, that I wanted you to appear on a podcast for a long time. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. We're going to talk about your area of expertise, which is all around personal performance, confidence, self-belief, which has all of these things have a lot of implications when it comes to the theme of this podcast: leadership communication, presenting, public speaking. And I'd like to start with a curiosity, because I follow you online, Tomas, and I've been doing it for a few years now. By the way, can you believe it? I think when we met, it was 2018. 2018. It's now
I believe it. Yeah.
5 years. It's been 5
years.
Yeah, it feels like yesterday, 5 years. And I know you are very transparent with your goals, your achievements. And I saw on your blog that I think it was maybe towards the end of last year, that you've run a 70K ultra marathon. And I wanted to ask you about it because I also run a lot, but not like you. Now, you told me before we got started that you are preparing for a 100K ultra marathon. I
right.
run every single day, Tomas, but for me, it's just a 20-minute thing. It's more of a mental thing. After work, every day, I love it, but it's 20 minutes and I finish, I'm tired and I feel like I've done something amazing. You do 70 kilometers, 100 kilometers. How can you do that?
Well, if you put the right training in, I don't say it's not difficult. You run for 7 hours. I mean, I run for 7 hours, and it actually went quite quick. And I actually wrote an article about this, and I think I learned a lot about it and actually realized how much personal development in general helped me, with that goal in particular. One of the key things was just planning and pacing, because if you look at my Strava overview of the run, I was very consistent with my pace for the 7 hours because I had very clear plan. I knew what I needed to do. The nutrition, you have to fuel and take salt tablets, and there's a lot of technicality that comes into it. But I think the mindset game of the run, at some point it just becomes about the mindset, rather than physically you reach a point where you're just tired and everything hurts, but it's the head and the heart that keeps it going.
But one of the things I like about you, Tomas, is that on the one hand, at least that's what I see as an outsider. To me, you are an achiever. You get things done, you achieve things. But on the other, in the way you communicate, you are very much down to earth. I like your approach. And I have to say, also for listeners, you are one of the main people who years ago told me a very important skill, because you told me, as part of the Dent accelerators, how to sell, which for somebody who runs a business, not just for business owners, but especially for business owners, it's a crucial skill. In the end, if we think about business, you need to make something, you need to sell something. It's so at the very, very least, it's 50% of what you need to do. I would argue even more. So thank you very much again for that. And also, over the years, a couple of times, I wanted some advice from you. You've always been very, very present and supportive. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, pleasure. And on that note, I just want to acknowledge you and congratulate you on the success that you've built. I've been watching as well over the years, being very relentless, very hardworking, and what you've built, it's great. And yeah, it's inspiring. And if I could have just helped you on the way, and if you learn something from that, it's helping you, then I've done my part.
Thank you. And one of the things that stood out for me when I met you a few years ago is your mantra, if you want, your tagline, which is very memorable. You talk about the fact that okay is not enough. For our listeners, before we get into the actual meat of the conversation, and by the way, this is very much connected, of course. For those who know nothing about this, what do you mean by okay is not enough?
A great question, and it's sometimes misunderstood in what I mean by that. You see, when I say okay, it's not enough, it's not about never being satisfied and going like crazy, always wanting more and running yourself to the ground. It has nothing to do with that. It's when I talk about the okay, if you imagine sort of 3 levels or 3 zones in life, sort of stuck on top of each other as a cake. Very simply, okay, it's in the middle. Below okay is something I call the rut. And on top of the okay is something that I call the winning zone. And I believe most of us are in the okay zone in life because we are, it's our instinct to be drawn to okay, because okay means safety and safety means survival. It's our evolutionary drive. And to simply explain that, imagine, let me ask you this question. Let's say you go on holidays somewhere to a resort and the resort is okay. Would you go back?
Maybe not.
If you go to the cinema and watch a movie and it's okay, would you go and watch it again?
Yeah, maybe not.
And that's how we often feel about, okay, it's okay. I call it the tolerable, not necessarily like the bottom of the okay. I call it the zone of tolerable discomfort. But, okay, we're drawn to it, but it's convenient, but the okay is rarely fulfilling and exciting and just makes us feel alive. It's the winning zone. And it doesn't mean that we have to be in the winning zone all the time, but we should be in the winning zone in the important areas of our life, whether it's the business or just how we are as a person in terms of confidence or even public speaking. We should at least aspire to be in the winning zone, because I know, look, many people who come to me for coaching, their life is not in shambles, their life is not falling apart, they're okay. They tell me it's nothing hurts and I get by, it's good, it's okay. But something is missing. This is the thing. When we are in the okay zone, and this is the, I think, worst part about it, deep inside, deep in our heart, we know we can do better. And that's one of the reasons why I run these, ultra marathons and so on, because I feel, okay, I can do better. And there's something very satisfying when you know that you've done your best. And it doesn't mean winning necessarily the race or having the best business or being the best speaker. It's just you knowing that you pushed yourself and you're squeezing the best out of yourself. And you can never do it while staying okay.
Yeah. And you already mentioned the word confidence, which is a key word for me, Thomas, because if I think about our audience, our listeners, even today, our clients, if there's one thing they want to achieve is they want to become more confident presenters, more confident speakers. Now, you talk a lot about how to be more confident, how to build confidence. Before we went live, you also shared a very interesting story about, was it Nikki, one of your clients, which illustrates nicely how you look at things in terms of confidence. So can you comment on that? Can you tell us a little bit more about building confidence in general? And then it would be great if you could include that anecdote from Nikki, if you don't mind.
Sure. So look, confidence is often quite misunderstood because people think of confidence as, as having confidence, but we don't have confidence. We do confidence. We even say the language that I am confident. It means that you are being confident. So it means it has something to do with our actions, right? So confidence is our actions and our beliefs. Now, when I work with clients on confidence, very often if you think of a person who is not confident, let's say a public speaker who is not confident. If you close your eyes and picture somebody, or for your listeners, the speaker will have certain characteristics. It will have certain body language. There'll be a way they speak. Maybe it's quiet and doubtful, and maybe it's too slow or too fast and kind of scattered. The way they move, it probably wouldn't be, they wouldn't carry themselves. They may be hunching over and nervously, pacing up and down. So there'll be certain body language. Because when we feel a certain way, and Tony Robbins talk about state, when we're in a certain state, it affects our physiology, our beliefs, and our language. Now, what many people don't realize is our physiology also affects our state. Our beliefs and our focus also affects our state. And our language, the way we speak, also affects our state. And so the first thing when I work with people on confidence, I help them understand that confidence is something that they do. And we start looking at these individual areas of that. So physiology, your body language, is the easiest thing to fix. It's the quickest because we have 100% control over that. And but also in terms of confidence, because it's something we do, it's sort of a skill. And I even say confidence comes from the feeling of competence, and competence comes from experience. So the more experience we are doing something or being a certain way, or speaking a certain way, walking a certain way, the more competent we feel to do it right, and the more confident we will feel to be that way. And so I believe a lot of these skills or qualities are actually behavioral skills. And so to use that mini case study of one of my clients, when this goes back several years, her name is Nikita, a great girl, and she came to me because she wanted to improve her confidence. She was working in a bank, and she wanted to work as a PA for one of those, big bosses. But when she went for an interview, she just froze. They asked her questions, and she told me she just froze. She can't speak. She's just sitting there, and obviously she's not getting the job. And look, on paper, she had all the reasons to feel confident. She was in her early 20s, attractive, intelligent. It was all there, but for some reason, she didn't. Now, so we started working on practicing confidence, but also during the sessions, we started working on just picking apart why her beliefs and what is she focusing on. Look, if you focus on the reasons why you shouldn't be or can't be confident, you find them. We always find what we're looking for. If you ask yourself, what am I going to mess up? Well, you answer your own question. Well, because I may do this, I may do that. If you ask yourself, okay, how can I get it right this time? Well, you answer your own question and you will find your better answers. So just helping understand that the focus is important. But also we were working on her beliefs, which is, a whole big conversation. We usually have some kind of, beliefs, belief is nothing more than information we take as truth, right? And so we were looking at these beliefs and essentially putting them under the microscope and fact check them. And we realized or found out that many of the beliefs were not true. They were based on nothing. She was just looking for evidence for that, and we can always find it. But the key part, the behavioral change, happened with the task or kind of agreement that I have with many of my clients now, regardless of what goal we're working on, if it's applicable, which was, look, I would like you to every day do something that will be a little bit uncomfortable, be a little bit scary, just a tiny bit, like 1, 2, 3% outside of your comfort zone. I'd like you to check in with me on WhatsApp what it was that you did. Now, just to paint the picture of how bad her confidence level was when we started, her first message was, I sat next to a stranger on a bus. Like, that was uncomfortable. Imagine. And so, but she was checking in every single day, and over time, her messages, all these updates where I could see the action, so I getting braver and bolder, to the point that I don't know, few weeks in, she messaged me that she went shopping with her sisters, I believe, or friends, which was first time for her, or she felt uncomfortable doing that. And then a couple of months in, I remember specifically there was this message where she said, I spoke up during the meeting at work, which she's never done before. She was sitting, through the meetings because she didn't want to make a mistake. And she felt great about it. Hey, well done. I always, acknowledge it and praise it a little bit, because behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated. And a couple of weeks later, she messaged me something related to the previous one. She said, I corrected my boss during a meeting at work. And I was like, whoa, amazing, but hold on a moment. It's all great building confidence, but don't lose your job. Don't appeal to the wrong people. But still, we worked together for about 6 months. And I think like 4, maybe 5 months in, one of the messages was that she gave a speech at her grandma's birthday party. And there were a lot of people there. She had a big family. And she was every single day checking in with something that she did that was a little bit uncomfortable. I imagine this is like 5 months, and she went on holiday. She was still doing it. And I remember towards the end of our 6-month program, I was running workshops on lots of different topics. One of them was self-confidence. And I had about 35, 40 people booked. And I told her, I said, hey, I'm doing this confidence workshop, and I absolutely love the journey that you've been on and how much you grew. How do you feel about coming to that workshop and sharing a little bit about your journey? And I thought it was a long shot, because you know what it's like to do public speaking. 40 people is not a small crowd. And she said, yeah, okay, I can do it. And she showed up on the day. She had notes on a little, sticky notes or little cards. And she spoke for about 10 minutes. Again, she wasn't a motivational speaker, rah-rah, Tony Robbins style, but she stood in front of them, calm, collected, and she shared her story. And I was absolutely blown away. And you know what? Eventually, she went for the interview and she got the job. And now, you could actually look her up on Instagram. Her handle is, I believe, Nikki Yoga. And it says Nikki Yoga because she has her own yoga studio. She has her own business. And this shy girl, a few years ago, is now on Instagram making videos, speaking to the camera, sharing about the benefits of yoga, doing little yoga routines. And she was just recently mentioned in one of the big newspapers because she shared her opinions about some kind of controversy that's going on around yoga. And I was really stoked for her because she continued the journey, even, of course, after we finished working together. But I could clearly see how her mindset has been changing, because throughout those actions, she was building up that confidence credit score, so to speak, the history of all these different actions, which is really important, because very often when people doubt themselves, it's because they're about to do something new, maybe speaking in public, and they think, well, I've never done this before. I don't know what to do. They have no history to back that confidence with. Whereas if you do something regularly that's a little bit uncomfortable, you're building up that track record that you can really lean on as evidence that you can do scary things.
And Thomas, the key takeaway for me, if we want to bring it back even more to presenting, public speaking, is something I deeply believe in. So we are very much aligned. You said that confidence is something that you do. So it boils down to the actions you take. A key mistake I see so often, Thomas, is that in my space, lots of people think that confidence in presenting comes from wishful thinking or innate self-belief. Whereas no, confidence has nothing to do with that. Confidence comes from, as you said, from what you do. It comes from familiarity. The more you do certain things, the more you speak in public, the more confident you will become at speaking in public. So we are very much very much aligned there. You also started talking about, as you said, Nikki's story. You also mentioned something around beliefs, limiting beliefs. Can we go a little bit deeper? Because I know that you also talk about overcoming limiting beliefs. Now, one limiting belief I hear all the time with my listeners, clients is, I'm not a great presenter, or I'm not a natural speaker, I'm not a natural storyteller. So that's an example of a limiting belief. What's your take on beliefs, limiting beliefs, and how to overcome them?
Great question. So I think the first thing I do with people when it comes to working on limiting beliefs is to help them understand that these are just beliefs. Not everything we believe is true. As I said, belief is just an information that we take as truth. But very often we are wrong. And sometimes people think of a belief as a table, as a tabletop. Now, the tabletop will only hold up if it's held up by legs, right? So belief is the tabletop, and the legs are the supporting evidence that the belief needs to hold up. And as I mentioned earlier, we always find what we're looking for. Now, not necessarily in the riches in life and things like that, but the answers are what we're searching for with our focus. That's what we will see, right? And when people have a belief that I'm not a natural presenter, this will make them focus on finding evidence why that may be true. They look at other people who make presenting just effortless, and because they're masterful at it. That's what masters do. People who are extremely good at doing something, they make it look effortless. But we both know it's through enormous amount of repetition and refinement. That's what makes it effortless. Little interlude. Just I live in Canary Wharf, and when I look out of the window, there's a big building, and one of my old friends lived there, and she was a pianist, a concert pianist, extremely accomplished. And once I had a play, and you can't even see the hands how quickly she's playing. And I told her, well, this is amazing. I'm absolutely blown away. And she told me, you wouldn't be so impressed if you knew how much I practice this, right? And that's why I don't believe in talent. I believe in physiological predisposition. If someone is 6'5", they just have advantage for being a basketball player over someone who is, 5'3". But there are basketball players who are quite short. But I sort of refuse to believe in talent, because anybody who I know who is so-called talented, it's almost offensive to attribute that to some innate advantage, because I know how hard they work on the mastery that they have. Going back to the beliefs, this is the first point to help them understand, or my clients understand, people understand that, okay, what you believe in may not be true. And okay, you're not a natural presenter. Okay, so let's look for what's your evidence for that? Well, I'm not very good at that. Okay, how much have you practiced being a great presenter? Well, I haven't really. So how could you be one? Well, that person is really, they make it look so effortless. okay, so let's go on their Instagram, or let's go on their YouTube, or let's find them online and let's look at the history. By the way, that's one thing that I really love doing with people who are successful, let's say on YouTube, or let's say YouTube public speaking. Scroll back to their first video, so you can select, the oldest ones be showing for. See the videos from 10 years ago. I mean, it's just like you'll be cringing probably, right? This is where they started, and so the first thing is just dismantling the beliefs that are holding them back, just to help them realize that, well, okay, maybe I'm not disadvantaged. Maybe I just haven't put in the work. Maybe I haven't really got the mentoring or training, and I haven't really tried, and so on and so forth. When I got into public speaking, Andrea, because I didn't have money to run ads for my coaching business. And I thought, I need to get in front of people somehow. And an old friend of mine sort of teased me that I don't have what it takes to run a workshop. I'm thinking, F you. And on my birthday, I opened a meetup. I scheduled a first workshop, and I was hoping that no one would show up. I had around 30 people showing up. I was shitting myself. And you know what? It wasn't great. I was shaking, had my notes, and I was actually quite upset with, people said it was valuable, but I wasn't very pleased with my performance. And I thought, okay, no, this is unacceptable. I need to get over this, because I truly believe that this is just a skill. So I decided that I'll be running weekly workshop, and I did weekly workshop for 2 years. I did 100 talks. And of course, eventually I got better, I got more comfortable, I overcame my limiting beliefs, and I realized, okay, it's not really about me, it's about them. I could tell you more about this if you would want to. But, and that's one of the reasons why I'm now one of the mentors for Dent, because I can speak in front of 100 people or run, whole day Zoom class, because I've done it so much.
Actions.
And now I have the belief that I can do it. I've done it so many times. And so going back to the beliefs is, first thing, dismantling the inaccurate negative beliefs that they have that are holding them back, which is usually quite simple, because when we put them under the X-ray and just do a little bit of detective work, what the evidence is, there's no evidence. All the evidence is just invalid. And then start building up positive beliefs. So looking at what they've already accomplished, looking at their how good they already are, that they're not giving themselves credit for. Because anybody who is a little bit ambitious, we have I would like to consider myself being ambitious as well. We have a terrible habit of not acknowledging and celebrating our little wins, because it's always like, okay, and let's be honest, it's like when I reach that milestone, then I feel good enough, and I feel like I've earned it, or I feel, whatever that might be. We get there, what we do. Okay, great. What's next? And so it's also, I'm teaching my clients to just, okay, let's just celebrate this a little bit. You don't have to go out and have a party or something like that. Just sit with yourself for a moment and acknowledge the work that went into this, that you had a million opportunities to quit, but you didn't, and that you've done something that you thought was impossible, because all this helps build that mindset or even system in building more positive mindset.
Yeah.
Is this making sense?
Oh yeah, a lot of sense. And you mentioned something. You gave the example of somebody who has the limiting belief of, I'm not a natural presenter. He or she often starts comparing themselves with other speakers. And there's an article on your blog where you talk about, which I found very interesting. It's counterintuitive, but I agree with you, and I would like you to comment on that. You talk about how to not stop comparing yourself. Basically, you explain why, if you do it right, comparison can be good. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. And it's and you know this, and your listeners surely know this as well. We have the tendency, especially in the world of social media and all the woo-ha around it, is that people go on Instagram and they see someone throwing money in the air, having cars and six packs and the right curves and amazing tan and facial feature symmetry, all these things. And we tend to compare ourselves to them. It's a natural thing. It's an evolutionary adaptation because we, in our mind, we always perceive where we are on that hierarchy in different areas, whether it's look, wealth, so on and so forth. And so it's a lot of the other advice, let's put it this way, it usually is along the lines of stop comparing yourself. And it's like saying stop breathing. It's so hard to work against some of those instincts that we have, which are they're faster than you can realize. You can train or practice to do it less, but it will always be there. Now, the reason why I say, well, the article is about how to not stop comparing yourself to other people, because I truly believe comparison can be fantastic and incredibly valuable and useful tool if you do it right. And this is something that, I used to compare myself in the wrong way to my peers. And hey, when I came here to the UK, I was an immigrant from Eastern Europe with, I got no money. And yeah, I wasn't in a good position to win any kind of comparison. And it hurts. It can be, every time you do it, it chips away from your confidence, and it can make you feel inadequate and disadvantaged, so on and so forth. But when I got into personal development, so I didn't like how comparing myself to others made me feel sometimes, especially when they're more successful and accomplished and so on and so forth. So I thought, okay, hold on. I need to change this. And there is, in the article, I believe I mentioned a quote, one of my favorite ones, that goes, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I thought, okay, how can I don't seem to be able to stop it, but how can I change the, what it does to me? And I actually realized I love comparing myself, because, especially to people who are better than me, because I don't look at it as, oh, they're up here and I'm down here. And at the end of it, I'm thinking, okay, they have something I want. How did they get there? How did they do it? How did they achieve it? There must be I don't believe it just fell on their lap. So it's a first step in recognizing someone who is better than me at something that I want. And there is a good chance that I can find some breadcrumbs that they left behind on their way, like studying them. How did they do it? So if you want to be a bodybuilder, for example, let's make a relevant example, really great public speaker. So I'll be looking at, I would find someone who is incredible at presenting. There's actually one guy that I follow on Instagram. He's really good. And it's good that he's better than me. Why would I be learning from someone who's worse than me? But in order to recognize that, I need to recognize that, okay, he's better than me. Great. Okay, how does he do that? Does he have a training? Let me watch a lot of his videos. What's his body language like? How does he speak? His cadence. And so I use that comparison as a starting point for becoming better. And sometimes people protect their ego or confidence, maybe, or the self-image by surrounding themselves with people who are, equal or worse than them. Okay, it will massage your ego a little bit. Good for you, but so what? If you want to be the best speaker in a room, or the smartest person in a room, or the fittest person in a room, great. If that's your endpoint, fine, stay there. But if you want to get better, you better recognize and compare yourself to other people, so you can recognize who's better than you.
And there's always,
so that's my little twist on it.
Yeah, I like it very much, Thomas. There's always room for improvement also. And let's talk about fear, because you also talk about fear. There's, again, on your blog, there's a practical tactic, if you want, or a principle. You talk about fear flipping or something.
Fear flipping, yeah.
And if we think about, again, our conversation, fear of public speaking is a very common fear. Studies show that about 75% of people have some kind of fear of public speaking. Look, I'm a presentation coach. I speak in public all the time. I help others do the same, but I always feel nervous before presenting. So we've got that. Now, how do you look at these in the context of fear flipping? And it would be great if you can explain what that is and how it can help.
Mm-hmm. So the fear flipping, I come up with all these different methods, and a lot of my coaching and my approach to how I work with my clients. See, I'm not a theorist. I didn't just read textbooks, and I don't just parrot to people what they could read themselves somewhere. I have been obsessively studying personal development for some 16 years or so, and I try lots of things. Some of them work better than others, and I try to build my own methods to things. I'm fear flipping. It's another one. I don't know if I came up with that, or maybe I heard it, read it somewhere. Just labeled it as fear flipping. So essentially, what it is very simple. It's finding a bigger fear, so almost alternative fear to what people are afraid of. For example, if someone is afraid of being a public, to do public speaking or starting a business, so I would flip the fear and I would say, okay, that's fine, but aren't you more afraid of never starting a business and never having your own freedom, or being the master of your own time and make as much money, as much work you're putting in? And aren't you afraid of always being stuck in your day job that you say that you hate and you're not rewarded enough? Isn't that more terrifying than standing in front of people and speaking for 10 minutes or an hour? Or with business, isn't staying in the job that you hate and all the things that I mentioned, isn't it more scary than actually giving it a shot and starting your own business? Or never becoming a public speaker, having this fear kind of win over you, and it will always be on your mind. Oh, you always wanted to speak, that you would love it, and you're scared of it, and it will come back, and you will resent yourself. It will be playing on your mind. It will be chipping away from your confidence. Isn't that something isn't a bigger fear to be afraid of, a bigger thing or impact to be afraid of? And so people have those usually little fears, but I paint on the wall something way more terrifying. Real though, if they say, no, actually, I don't mind. I'm not that scared of staying in the same job. Well, great. Maybe you don't want so badly to start your own business. Right? Very okay. Very rarely that happens. But if that was the case, fine. But it's really, fear is a great motivator. And just because we are afraid of something doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. We should really compare it to, okay, what's the alternative? Isn't that something to be even more afraid of? I'm very pragmatic and methodical in my approach. So this is one of the things that I do.
Couple of things there. One is, I guess what that does is, and I'm not, Thomas, I'm not an expert in your area. I'm not a psychologist. I know that you study psychology, but I think what that does is it also creates perspective. And as you were explaining this, I was thinking about in other areas of life, for example, because you mentioned starting a business also. You start a business and maybe you've got a goal of, in the UK, for example, you want to reach the threshold, the VAT threshold, £85,000. And when you start, that looks like a dream. And then you put in the work, you do what you need to do, and then you get there. And then immediately the perspective changes. So what used to be a dream maybe 12 months before or 5 years before now is something that's not enough anymore. So I think that's connected, creates that kind of perspective. And another thought, one of the other reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast is because I like your practical approach. You said I'm not a theorist. Also, what I see externally is that everything you say is backed by science. It's not about woo-woo remedies or bullshit, to be honest. So I like and I respect your approach, Thomas. And there's another article I found on your blog where you say, go ahead.
One thing, I appreciate that. And I just remember one important thing when it comes to the fear, and I think you might like this. It's relevant to what you just said. Is very often the fear that's holding people back, let's say public speaking, it's not the fear of public speaking if they want to become a presenter. It's the fear of giving it a try and realizing, for whatever reason, they don't have what it takes, and the dream would burst. And so very often people are afraid of actually testing or putting that dream to the test and realizing that they can't have it. So they prefer to just have that dream and always think, like the grandpa thing, if I did apply myself, I could have had this business or run marathons or whatever that might be. Some people just prefer to have the, if only, or, what if story to tell. But what I often counter this with is, okay, well, you don't have one shot at this, right? Become a public speaker or great presenter. It's not like you try once and you can't do it again. I've botched up so many talks. Some of my talks were not great, especially the first ones. But you know what? I showed up and I did again, and little by little improve.
And it's a never-ending
so people
journey.
People are often afraid of losing the dream.
Yeah, interesting.
If they try.
And you made me think of a story as part of this podcast. Some time ago, I interviewed Alex Galvez. She's better known for the hashtag #AuthenticAlex on LinkedIn. She talks about authenticity. And she shared with me her experience. We were talking about this particular thing, fear of public speaking. Many years ago, she had a big fear of speaking in public. And at some point, she had 2 job offers. Both of them were great, exciting. One offer did not involve her speaking in public. The other one did. And even if she was super afraid of speaking in public, she deliberately chose the one that required her to speak in public because she wanted to go with the and try to overcome that fear. So the idea is that it's not about overcoming your fear, in this case of public speaking. And maybe, Thomas, you tell us, maybe that's the same in other areas, I don't know. It's not about overcoming the fear. It's about making the decision to do it anyway, despite the fear. And then
Of course.
If we make that decision to do it anyway, despite the fear, if we make that decision enough times, as you said, over 2 years, you've run 100 workshops. Then we do it today, tomorrow, the day after, 1, 2, 3, 4, 100 times. Then eventually we get to a point where it becomes almost natural to either overcome it or at least address it or channel it in a positive way. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. 100%. We, as humans and other living forms as well, we are very good at normalizing things, getting used to things, which is great, and it's bad as well, because we can get used to low standards for ourselves. We can also get used to great riches. I work with a client who was call it borderline billionaire. And look, money wasn't a thing in his life. It's not a barrier to anything. But it just didn't, for him, it didn't feel any special, because he's been that rich for a very long time. And so we get used to anything. And this is where, when I was speaking of Nikita, for example, just developing confidence or public speaking skills and so on, is stepping outside of that metaphorical comfort zone. You just put your pinky out or your big toe out. You just step outside and go back and back out and back in and back out. It's a little bit like, imagine that you you change jobs, and it's a different part of town, different building. Everybody's new. You don't necessarily know the layout of the offices. You don't know the people, but you go in and you spend a little bit of time there. You go back home. You go back in, you spend a little bit of time there and start recognizing or start learning, where the cafeteria is, where the toilets are. You start saying hi to certain people, and you build this familiarity with the environment, which used to be outside of a comfort zone. But if you spend enough time there, your comfort zone will expand to the area. Same thing with public speaking. Of course, it's terrifying. You're standing in front of people, everybody's looking at you. Crazy thoughts are going through your head. You're forgetting everything, sweating, shaking. But at some point, you do it enough and you realize, okay, I didn't die. No one was throwing tomatoes at me. People seem to get some value out of it. And you do it again, and you normalize it. And it would just become like you going chatting to people. And it's just, people need to give themselves the opportunity to get used to that new feeling, that new experience, so it can become comfortable. Yeah. And it doesn't happen with a powerful coaching session. It's experience and exposure.
Yeah, until it normalizes itself. Yeah, I agree. Tomas, there's also another article I found on your blog where you go against the typical piece of advice, which is fake it till you make it. I've heard this so many times, fake it till you make it. You seem to believe that perhaps that's not necessarily good advice. Tell us more.
I hate it. But if it will become so obvious, hopefully, to anybody who's listening. One of them, and you know this as a business owner, and through that I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs. One of the biggest fears when we're coming out with something genuine is people will dislike it, or people think that we are some kind of fraud, we're not genuine, especially in sales, right? I'm into sales. So people are afraid that the customer will feel like, oh, he or she's just in here to get my money, and they try to rope me or trick me into something. That's one of the biggest fears when we're coming in genuine, that someone won't believe it. And so the idea of fake it until you make it. So essentially it says pretend that you're something you're not. And hopefully, you'll somehow grow into it. It's a little bit like, say, okay, someone has some personality work to do, and you say, okay, go on a date and fake being, let's say fake being rich, or fake being, lie about your job. First of all, you're attracting the person on something that's not true. Secondly, it will play on your mind because you're being fake. And so imagine, even if they like you, going with the date scenario, they fall for something that is not true. And I'm against that. I think you said, Alex, I'm really encouraging people to be authentic, and genuine authenticity is one of my highest values. And so rather than fake it until you make it, I kind of flip the meaning of it, and I tell people, practice it until you become it, right? And it means, okay, you go there and you have certain areas that you need to develop, let's say for sales conversation or public speaking, right? Okay, you're not a great public speaker, but you know what some of the, let's say the body language should be like, how you should speak, how you should make eye contact with the audience. Don't fake it, practice it. Be yourself, be someone who is practicing these new skills. And if you, going back to the point that I made just a moment ago, if you do it and practice it enough, you will normalize it, you will become it. It will become unconscious competence. But I think it's almost just like a linguistic or semantic tweak to the phrase. But it changes a lot how people feel about it. I would never encourage anybody to fake it, just be fake. And somehow along the way, it will become true. No, just practice until you get it.
You're right. It seems like a small semantic difference, but it has big implications. Yeah. Thomas, as we get closer to the end of our conversation, I love books. I love reading. Now, if you think about everything we talked about today, personal development, self-confidence mainly, and belief, we talk about limiting beliefs. Is there one book? I know that you, because I follow you online, you also read books. Is there one book? And I know sometimes it can be a bit of a hard question, because just one book that you would really recommend if our listeners today would like to go a little bit deeper on those topics. If you've got more than one book, that's fine, but at least it would be great if you could give us one book for those who want to go a bit deeper.
So I'll give you 3, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. First of all, I think they're great recommendations. Secondly, I would discourage people from ever thinking, what's that one thing that, whatever that might be. And I don't know, for the purpose of the podcast, you're asking, because if people, if I then list 25 books, we don't have time for that. But every time someone asks me, what's that one thing? That's not, first of all, just scrap that thinking, because there is, imagine that you ask Michael Jordan, hey, what's that one training routine that would make me a great basketball player? He would say, no, come on, man. That's not how it works. But so, but I totally hear you. So I'll recommend 3 so people can choose. They're quite similar in what's in the books. The first one is The Paradox of Choice. The second one is called Predictably Irrational.
Predictably Irrational.
And Predictably Irrational. And so those 2 books are somewhat similar in what they talk about. It goes into how we make decisions, often irrational decisions, often, we are biased. Our brain is an amazing thing, but it has its blind spots and its tendencies and its biases that don't always serve us. And it's really useful to understand how the brain works, especially how we make decisions, and often biased decisions. And those 2 books go into it in a lot of detail, a lot of research evidence, really backed up. It's almost like a science paper. And the third book is Influence by Robert Cialdini. Yeah, and who, again, it's similar thing. It's how the mind and thinking and beliefs and perception is being shaped. But how we can shape it as well. Always, what's in these books, it's often about how we're being manipulated, but we can reverse engineer that, and we can manipulate ourselves in a way that we want. So I think these books are full of great tools in how to shape our minds and perception and thinking. I really love them. I've read them many, many times.
Thank you. I didn't know the first 2. I've read Influence, and I agree with you. It's perhaps one of the most important books I've read. Fascinating book, Influence. Now, you said that you don't like the one thing type of question or approach. However, I'm going to try again.
Please do.
I hear you as well, but let me try again. Again, if you think
please don't take it as me correcting you. That's not what I meant. It's more for your listeners.
No, and I get it, and I agree with you. Even if I think about, again, my area of expertise, Thomas, if somebody asked me that question, I would have answered the same way. I would say, look, I could give you 100 books. There's no one book, but then when I ask the question, then I flip it.
Sure, I get it.
Now, if you think about everything we talked about, is there one thing that you would like our listeners today to remember, to take away, to to do whatever it is. Is there one concept? It could be an idea, reflection, an insight, anything that you've shared which you think is perhaps the most important thing we talked about today?
Mm-hmm. So I will have I'll give you one thing, but probably not necessarily what you're asking for. Oh, maybe it is. I would encourage them to listen to the podcast again or watch the video again, not because we are two handsome men, but because there is a lot of really good insights, and that could be just one thing. Sometimes, and I go against my own thing, sometimes we read a book or we watch a video, and there could be one thing, one sentence, one phrase, one point that it does something to us, right? And so I would, usually when we watch something for the first time, listen to something for the first time, it's the information is coming at us, and we kind of go through it. But I know this from reading books multiple times. Sometimes when you read it again, it's just this whole new wealth of knowledge, of things that you didn't notice before. So I would encourage them, if they can take it, to listen through this again with a pen and paper, and maybe pause it, and just, when we make some of those points that you shared, some great things as well, maybe pause it and reflect on it. How does it, and ask themselves, how does it apply to me? Am I doing this? Could I use this? Could I apply some of this? And because this shouldn't be just another podcast that they listen to, because there'll be another one. To really get value out of something, we need to sort of pause and work on extracting that. And the best way to do that is to re-listen to it and take some notes and then apply it. So that's my maybe unusual tip.
Thomas, you made me think of my experience with you, because again, if we go back 2 years ago when I was doing the Dent Accelerator and you were the sales mentor, then it was not just for the sales element. It was like the way the program was structured. It was a 12-month program which was based around repetition. So it was sales, it was product, it was like, there were a few things, but then you would cover every element, and then you would repeat it, and then you would repeat it a third time. And I have to tell you, Thomas, that I had 3 sales sessions with you over 12 months. All of them were super useful, but you're right. For me, the last one was a game changer. Even if you went through exactly the same things, but then maybe it was the way, because I had already acquired certain elements, it was an opportunity for me to just fine-tune certain elements, and it was a game changer, and that was thanks to their repetition approach.
Yeah, and honestly, it's so useful. Let's maybe wrap with this one little final takeaway. When I was doing those workshops, I mentioned I had like 100 workshops, and I had, I think, about 10 topics that I just repeated because they're the most popular. And I often started my workshop with saying, thanks everybody for coming today. I'm really looking forward to share this information with you about such and such topic. However, deep inside, I hope that you're not going to learn anything new. And people look at me like, what? That's why I'm here, to learn something new. And then I told them, they were like, why? And I told them, well, because if you sit through this, or maybe when they listen to your podcast today, they may go, well, I already know this. Yeah, I've heard about this. Yeah, I know changing beliefs and so and so. And I told them, because if you still have the problem that the talk was about, then it only means that you're not applying what you already know. So maybe this talk, or maybe this podcast, is the time where they just need to hear it. That time when I go, oh, yeah. I haven't really put it in practice. I'm not really doing that. So we often look for that magic bullet, something that would just click and will be easy to apply and get us the results. But that's not how it works.
Yeah. And Thomas, before we close, if anybody would like to connect with you, to learn more about what you do, to go deeper on your area of expertise, where should they go? What should they do?
I think the best place would be to either check out my LinkedIn or go to my website, okaysnotenough.com. I have a tomassvitorka.com as well. It's too hard to spell. So if they just go for okaysnotenough.com, it takes them to the same place. And I share a lot of content there, a lot of articles and videos, and on confidence. This gigantic article, which is about, I think it's 63 plus tips on how to build confidence. It's like 10,000 words long. Many of them have videos as well. The tips, a lot of content there. So I think my website would be the best place to come for more.
Perfect. And I'm going to include the link of your website to the in the show notes. Also, I'm going to include the links of the 3 books that you suggested. Everything will be in the show notes. And Tomas, thank you very much. As I said at the very beginning, I've wanted to have you for an episode of our podcast for a long time, and I'm happy that we did it. It was a great conversation. I personally learned a lot, and I'm glad that we found a lot of connections with the main reason why people like to listen to this podcast: communication, public speaking. So thank you very much for making those connections and making it relevant. And again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Let's keep in touch, and all the very best.
Thanks so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. I hope it's going to be useful to your listeners. And I just want to say one more time, well done. And as one of your former mentors, I'm really stoked watching you grow the way you do.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Ideas on Stage podcast, there are many more you might like, so please subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us what you think. You can find many more ideas on business communication at ideasonstage.com or by searching for Ideas on Stage on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.